Welcome to the 6 unsolved mysteries of the Atchafalaya swamp, a place where neither time nor logic can enter. Atchafalaya Basin, Louisiana, the largest swamp in the United States, and perhaps the most disturbing. Some places hide secrets, others swallow them whole. In the heart of Louisiana lies a labyrinth of dark waters, drowned roots, and suffocating silence. A place where very strange things have been happening for over a century. And to this day, no one has been able to explain them. What you're about to see reveals the darkest, most forgotten, and most unsettling side of this swamp. A place marked by stories that should not exist. Are you ready? Then get cozy, take a deep breath, and hold on to your pillow. Because now you're about to discover the marked mysteries of the Atchafalaya. The vanished floating village, the vanished floating village. In the year 1932, time seemed to stop in southern Louisiana. The Great Depression left families desperate, and the rivers gave what the land no longer could. It was there, hidden in the dark waters of the Atchafalaya, that 9 families built a life upon wooden planks, literally a floating village anchored in silence, lost in time, and one night erased from history. The settlement was simple. 9 wooden houses connected by wide planks tied with ropes to submerged cypress trunks. They were families of fishermen and crustacean gatherers. No electricity, no official records, only names passed on by word of mouth. Lower Village, the Water Hamlet, or simply the place where no one meddles. The residents sold fish in nearby towns, but kept their distance from any authority. Some said they were hiding fugitives, others that they were fleeing from something worse. On April 13th, 1932, an unexpected storm fell upon the region. It wasn't a hurricane. It wasn't a cyclone, but the winds were erratic, and the rain fell as if it didn't belong to that sky. A lumberjack camping less than 2 miles from the floating village wrote in his journal, "There was a thunderclap that didn't end. The sound stayed, stuck in the air, and then everything got too quiet. When morning came, the lumberjack went to the spot where he knew the village had been anchored. There was nothing, not a single house, not a single plank, not a single rope floating, just perfectly still water. Fishermen from nearby towns organized searches with paddles, harpoons, and ropes. They searched for days. They swept the swamp floor with iron hooks. Nothing. No furniture, no bodies, no fishing nets. The current was far too weak to have carried away entire structures without leaving a trace. One of the oldest boatmen said, if it had sunk, the smell would come after 2 days. If it had been taken, the wood would float for weeks. And he concluded, but what we saw was disappearance. In 1964, a young historian interviewing residents of Morgan City obtained an unofficial document from a military veteran. The man claimed that after the disappearance, the U.S. Army sent 2 armed canoes to investigate the area, fearing foreign or experimental activity. The alleged report stated, area shows absence of river current within perimeter. No signs of wreckage. Soil around aquatic vegetation suggests sudden retraction, not natural dispersion. The current could not carry entire structures without leaving traces. Document classified Level 2. Fluvial irregularity. Inconclusive. No record of this document appears in public archives. The story became legend among the basin's inhabitants. Some say the spot where the village stood still sinks small barges, as if the bottom is hungry. Others speak of white lights that appear there on hot, windy nights. And there are those who say that if you listen closely on the quietest of nights, you can still hear planks creaking softly somewhere where nothing floats. A village that lived in silence and sank without a sound. But not everything in the lake sinks. Some things float above the water. And when you look at them, they were already looking at you. The green lights of Bayou Shun are the green lights of Bayashane. For decades, longtime residents of the Atchafalaya have spoken of something that appears above the water but has no name. They don't call it a ghost, nor a UFO, nor a spirit. They simply refer to it as the green thing. The first known mention comes from 1942 when a duck hunter claimed to have seen a light floating above Bayou Shun, moving slowly as if searching for something in the water. He thought it was a boat, but there was no engine, no sound, no wake. The light simply hovered. In the following years, reports began to accumulate, always at night, always in the calmest parts of the swamp. Greenish-blue lights about the size of a flashlight floating about 6 feet above the water surface. Some moved silently. Others seemed to tremble, as if something inside them was restless. Attempts to approach by boat or canoe always failed. Engines lost power. The lights would drift away or slowly sink until they vanished. In 1958, 3 teenagers tried to follow them with a real camera. The film was never developed, not because it was lost, but because, according to the lab owner, it had been exposed from the inside out, a term no one could explain. One of the teenagers later suffered seizures in his sleep, and his father said he murmured in a language that no one on Earth speaks. In 1979, a technician from the Louisiana Electric Company conducted readings in Bayou Shun after an unexplained blackout in remote homes near the swamp. He camped for 3 nights with basic instruments. On the second night, at 3:17 in the morning, he reported in his field journal a light like plasma hovering about 100 feet away. The measuring device stopped working. His wristwatch froze, and the voice recorder captured a sequence of harmonic sounds resembling a descending musical scale made by something that didn't breathe. The scientific community never issued an official statement, but environmental engineers who studied the region in 2003 said the magnetic fields around Bayou Shun experience micro-vibrations with no visible source, and that digital devices show above-average data loss within a radius of over 1 mile. Those who grew up nearby learned to respect the lights. Don't point at them. Don't speak out loud. And above all, don't follow them. Because there's one thing all accounts have in common. If you stare for too long, the lights change position. First, they're above the water. Then, they're beside you. And if you blink, they're already gone. A light that casts no reflection, that floats without sound, and that seems to observe long before being observed. But in the Atchafalaya, not all hauntings float. Some wait buried. Others are scattered. Part of a much deeper secret. The submerged wary, the submerged wary. In September of 1971, a dredging crew was sent to an isolated section of the Atchafalaya Basin where a new dam was to be installed. The job was simple. Remove sediment and clear the swamp bed in a remote area rarely visited even by fishermen. But what they began to uncover was not wood nor stone. It was bone. At first, they thought it was the skeleton of an animal. A drowned deer, maybe an alligator. But as work progressed, the operators began to pull up what appeared to be dozens of fragments, all similar ribs, femurs, skulls, human, and not just 1 or 2. In 2 days of excavation, more than 120 complete bones were recovered, scattered, and buried nearly 25 feet deep in dense mud. No clothing, no tools, no personal items, and no signs of coffins or traditional burials. That's when the chief engineer halted the work and alerted state authorities. 2 vehicles arrived, uniformed men, but with no visible identification. They photographed the site, collected some of the remains, and ordered the area to be covered again with sand and concrete for geotechnical safety. Days later, the site was reclassified as an unstable area for construction. The dam project was abandoned. The subject vanished from official reports, but a dredging crew worker who never returned to the swamp wrote in his personal journal something his children found years later. They weren't just bones. Some of the skulls were too long. The teeth were in the wrong places, and they were all facing upward, as if waiting for something. Archaeologists from LSU heard the story and tried to access official documentation from the project. There was nothing. No report, no map, not even photos of the excavation. The protocol number simply no longer existed in the region. Older locals say that part of the swamp has been avoided for generations, a place where nothing grows and even water doesn't want to stay. They say that sometimes at night the frogs don't croak there, birds don't fly overhead, and that the silence in that place seems deeper than the ground itself. In 2016, independent researchers returned to the area with underground imaging equipment. The terrain was sealed, but beneath it, sensors detected abnormal density patterns as if cavities containing organic matter were scattered underground. When they tried to extract a sample, the drill jammed, and the thermal probe suddenly overheated and burst. The instruments recorded a single pulse of heat coming from below, and then nothing. Since then, no one has gone back. But the questions remain. Who were they? Why were they buried so deep? And why were they erased from the records in a place where life moves in silence? Perhaps death has learned to hide, but it leaves traces. And the deeper you dig, the darker it gets. The silent vortex, the silent vortex. Not everything in the Atchafalaya moves with the current. There are places where the water spins but doesn't flow, where time seems to slow down, and where sound simply disappears. Between 2005 and 2011, experienced boatmen reported an unusual phenomenon in a remote stretch of the swamp, far from the usual routes and marked only by crescent-shaped leaning trees. They spoke of an area where the air felt denser, where paddles grew heavier, and where for a few minutes it was possible to hear absolutely nothing. One of the first accounts came from a river guide named Elvin. He described a moment when, while rowing through low branches, he realized that the sound of the water and even the frogs and crickets had vanished completely, as if someone had pressed a button. He tried to call out to his passenger, but couldn't hear his own voice. He saw the other's mouth moving, but heard no reply. He thought he was having a stroke. But just as it came, the silence disappeared and the swamp's noise returned all at once with a pop in his ears. The passenger noticed nothing. But when Elvin checked his watch, nearly 30 minutes had passed. Other reports followed the same pattern. Still water, gently swirling in concentric circles, breezes that vanished upon crossing the curve's edge, and a unanimous feeling among those who passed through that they were being watched, but not from above, from below. In 2010, an independent researcher named Marco Rizzulli went to the site with sonar and directional microphones. He wanted to measure underwater acoustics and ground vibrations. He never returned. His boat was found nearly 2 miles away, caught in roots. The equipment was intact, but the video camera showed an error. Files with hours of footage, all completely silent, just a continuous band of digital silence. Metadata confirmed the microphone was working, but nothing was recorded. No waves, no static, no clicks, as if it had captured a vacuum. The strangest part was that during file analysis, technicians noticed a hidden pattern in the silence. There a kind of irregular pulse, almost imperceptible, repeating every 41 seconds, a sound below the threshold of human hearing, but which caused physical discomfort in anyone listening through headphones for too long. Since then, the area has been informally known as the Silent Vortex. No official map marks it, but local fishermen know if the wind suddenly stops, if the sounds vanish and the water looks like glass, row backward. There is something in that place that doesn't repel sound, doesn't absorb it, but swallows it. And sometimes they say, if you listen too closely, you can hear a breath, but not around you, inside your head. And the worst part, it syncs with yours. The soundless screams of Bayou Noir. At night, the swamp breathes, but there are places where it seems to speak. And in Bayou Noir, south of the Atchafalaya, some say it screams. In 2013, researchers from the University of Lafayette installed underwater microphones in various parts of the basin to record the acoustic activity of aquatic fauna. The project was ecological in nature. They expected to capture sounds of fish, reptiles, and the nocturnal behavior of alligators. But one of the stations, number 6B, near the flooded edge of Bayou Noir, began picking up something that shouldn't have been there. The first recordings featured muffled noises like deep dragging moans. Upon analysis, it was determined that the source came from deep underwater more than 30 feet below. The sounds repeated in irregular patterns. Sometimes they resembled vocalizations, other times interrupted cries, and in certain moments words spoken with effort but distorted. At first, scientists suspected interference, but the signals were consistent with constant acoustic frequency and always originating from the same point. When the noise was filtered, the sound engineers noticed something disturbing. There were segments where a male voice, hoarse, desperate, seemed to repeat a single word slowly. Come back. Come back. Come back. There were no humans in the area, no radios, no audio equipment, and no known animal in the region makes vocalizations so close to human speech. For 4 consecutive nights, the phenomenon repeated until on the 5th, the microphone was pulled from the bottom and found 100 feet away from its anchor, as if something had yanked it with force. In the following years, curious individuals tried to replicate the recordings. Some succeeded, but in many cases, the captured sounds weren't limited to moans. They included murmurs in unrecognizable languages with almost ritualistic intonations. And always from the same place. In one such attempt made in 2019 by a group of independent documentarians, something new was recorded. A brief laugh, faint, dry, just once, and then silence. When asked what it could be, most longtime locals refused to respond. But one woman named Odette, who grew up in a still house nearby, stared blankly and said, "What you heard isn't there. It's trapped there. There are things at the bottom of the swamp that never wanted to come up, and we stay alive because we leave them alone." Since then, the Bayou Noir site has been left alone by researchers. There are no signs, no warnings, but the local boatmen steer clear. Some say the screams are still heard on nights when the water doesn't move. Others swear they've heard their own names being whispered right beside the hull of their boat. No one knows what's down there, but the swamp listens. And sometimes it answers. The boat that never stopped the boat that never stopped. In August of 1996, a honeymooning couple rented a small motorboat to explore a quiet section of the Atchafalaya Basin north of Paterson. They had maps, supplies, and basic navigation experience. They left at dawn. They did not return by sunset. The next morning, a forestry patrol helicopter spotted the boat. It was drifting in a straight line with no current. The engine was off, no OES, and yet it moved alone against the flow. The rescue team approached in a dinghy. The boat's engine was cold, turned off for hours, yet the hull was cutting through the water at a steady pace, as if something invisible was pushing it. Upon boarding, they found the couple's belongings untouched. Backpack, camera, radio, life jackets, everything in place but no one aboard. The strangest part wasn't the absence of people. It was the sound. As soon as they stepped onto the deck, they heard footsteps below, but there was no below. The boat was small, open, no cabin. The sound came from inside the wood, as if something was walking between the planks. The old radio with exposed wires crackled on an empty frequency until, for 5 seconds, a very faint voice came through. "It's not time yet." Then silence. The boat was towed in for analysis. No signs of struggle, no damage, no data on the GPS logs. When the camera tape was reviewed, it showed ordinary swamp footage until at one point everything shook. The couple stopped filming, and then a sequence of shaky images with a flashlight pointed at the floor, followed by a muffled sound, a sound many described as a slow beat, like a heartbeat coming from the water. The case was never solved. The couple was never found. The boat was dismantled and studied by a private institute linked to the Navy. Nothing was released. Years later, fishermen began reporting sightings of a very similar vessel. No lights, no sound, slowly crossing the swamp on foggy nights, always in the same direction, always with no one visible. And on some occasions it passed close enough for them to hear the engine was off. And then, as if pushed by an unseen force, the boat vanished into the mist. Perhaps some vessels are doomed to keep moving even without a destination. Perhaps in the Atchafalaya, there are forces that reject emptiness, that keep objects and stories in motion. Even when everything else has stopped, you've reached the end. And now you know that the Atchafalaya swamp holds much more than mud and silence. Here, the unexplainable does not sleep. It watches. It waits. Which of these mysteries gave you the biggest chills? And in which U.S. state would you like to dive for the next episode? Leave a comment below, hit that like button, and share with someone who loves real-life mysteries. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time because every week you go deeper into another marked mystery.